Will democracy survive in the next couple of years?
Essentially, we are the same.
There are so many needs that Minnesota has.
What people are saying they need right now.
Access to Democracy is made possible in part by a donation from Firefly Credit Union. Firefly is the new name of U.S. Federal Credit Union, which has proudly served the financial needs of the greater Twin Cities community since 1925. At Firefly, we guide our members forward and give them the power to chase dreams by delivering the financial solutions they need to get ahead. From checking accounts to mortgages, we'll light the way. We are Firefly Credit Union, and this is life illuminated. By Thomson Reuters, providing legal professionals with intelligence, technology, and human expertise they need to find trusted answers. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And Dr. Charles Crutchfield of award-winning Crutchfield Dermatology in Eagan. Acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians, a Minnesota native who trained at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Crutchfield personally treats all patients and states that experience counts and quality matters. Crutchfield Dermatology, look good, feel great, with beautiful skin.
And welcome back to Access to Democracy. We have certain guests who over the years have become special guests. And what I didn't anticipate today, that we were going to have Santa Claus as a guest this early in the year. But Mike Burbach, who is the vice president and editor of the Pioneer Press, started with us about 13 years ago. And you might as well tell the story of the beard, but welcome back. It's so good to have you back.
Thank you, Alan. It's always a pleasure to come and see you and visit with you, and it is again today.
And how did this beard start? Because this is new since the last time you were here, which is 2 years ago, by the way.
Well, when I lived in North Dakota, I used to grow one every winter, but then I moved to the banana belt here, and it wasn't necessary. But my young daughters insisted on it, and I finally capitulated. I'm hoping I'll get to shave it off soon.
Oh, okay. Yeah, over the summer, they're not as much fun as in the cold weather.
That's right. That's right. The summer winds are not as biting.
Says one who started this one in 1966.
Uh-huh.
It's had different incantations over the years. But
yes.
A little bit closer now. So the Pioneer Press is in a new office location, reasonably new, in St. Paul.
Yep.
And you have an editorial staff of what, 45 people or so?
About 45 now, yes. Mm-hmm.
And we want to talk about several things, but one of the things I want to talk about is putting together tomorrow's edition and how you go about it. But I did not know until you had an article recently in the Pioneer Press that the Pioneer is actually Minnesota's oldest newspaper. It goes back to 1849.
Trace our lineage way back, yes.
Yeah. I think we have a photo of that that you ran, as a matter of fact, of that first day's edition. If Rita can get it up on the screen there.
We have a young reporter named Nick Waltman who is also very interested in history, very interested in local history.
And there it is, right there.
It is. And Nick has just recently started a weekly newsletter and a weekly feature in the Sunday newspaper called From the Archives.
Yes.
He'll disappear into the archives and jump back out with all kinds of interesting things, because we have a remarkable amount of local history, obviously, in there.
1849, that's even before you were working there.
Even before I was working there, even before, yep, I would have had a different color beard back then.
So, the paper then moved on from the Pioneer to become, at some point, the Pioneer Press.
Yep. In the early days, there were a lot of newspapers in every city. There was a lot of competition. The history of U.S. newspapers is pretty interesting and extremely competitive. It's only in the latter half of the 20th century that there was a lot of consolidation. I mean, there were always newspapers coming and going, but in the early days, they were often partisan organs or business organs. There were a lot of them.
Now, that's a picture of the press room in what, the 1940s or something like that?
Yeah, the newsroom in the middle of the century.
And,
Different place, different time, different people.
Probably a very different look today.
Yes, a very different look today.
So,
But some of it is still the same. You know, we still want to go find out what's going on in our community and tell about it. That part hasn't changed.
and you mentioned Nick Waltman. He has done some interesting things. You've put out a couple of specials recently.
Yes.
And I was trying to find mine at home. I couldn't find it today.
I'll get it
bring
to
in
you.
here.
Yep.
But really fascinating, with a bunch of reporters doing articles on different things of interest to people. And those specials are really special. I mean, they are
So
really.
what we did with those, we started those a few years ago, and they come out, you know, once a quarter or thereabouts. And the aim on them, what we've talked about, is Nick has worked on most of them. You know, my aim is when people get done with them to say, I might not have known that. I live in an interesting place. And Nick and others who have worked on them have worked hard to achieve that, I think. And they've varied from a history of beer in St. Paul to a local report on the anniversary of the U.S. entry into World War I, about what was going on here and some of the aftermath, to more recently we published a second edition of one called Things We Make.
Yeah. That's the one I was looking for today that I couldn't find. I don't know where I put it, but
we make a lot of things here.
Fascinating.
Yeah. We make a lot of things here in St. Paul.
Things are made
Metro.
in Minnesota that.
From salsa to wire that goes in satellites to all kinds of things.
Assuming the tariffs don't drive everything out of business, including the farmers, let's hope we continue to make those things
I
to
think we
make
will.
Minnesota as unique as Minnesota is. And I say that now as a 23-year Minnesotan. It is a very, very unique place.
There's a lot here. Yes, it is.
One of the things I mentioned to you before we went on air is that covering sports, you now have a young lady who is covering the Twins.
The Twins, yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We hired Betsy just a few months ago. She came to our attention through a great program that we do with the University of Minnesota. Gail Golden, for a number of years, has organized a fall practicum for journalism students, through which somewhere between 5 and a dozen or 6 and a dozen students come and work for us for a semester. Not full time, but they get great experience, and Betsy was one of those a few years back. She went out and got some more experience. We had an opening, and we're glad to be able to hire her.
But the uniqueness of your opening is that it was in the sports department,
Yep.
and here she is covering a major league team. Now, there are not many women who they're starting to come into television now,
Yep.
mostly in secondary roles. But hers is not a secondary role.
She's our Twins
the
beat writer.
primary, as you say, beat writer
You bet.
of the Minnesota Twins, which
Yep.
is a great place to be at the present time. with
She
them.
couldn't have picked a better year.
Yeah, or maybe they're doing it because of her writing. I
Could
don't
be.
know.
I would think so.
And it's got to be a thrill for her, and
Yeah.
certainly a great experience also.
bet.
And she's a good
she's off
writer.
to a
I mean,
great
she
start.
really, not only in terms of covering the game, but getting the information behind the game.
Yep. I'm glad she's on board.
And
You bet.
now you have all these people regularly, shall we say, that are in the newsroom. What about your columnists? You certainly have some good regular columnists, both, as a matter of fact, your Sunday sports writing columnist was in here very recently as a guest of Behind the Game.
Oh, good.
But people like Rosario and Souchere, are they in the newsroom all the time, or are they just coming in to do their columns and that's it?
Rosario's in the newsroom a lot. Souchere is mostly retired, but we see Joe once, twice a week, and he comes in. Yeah, so they are, I think of both of them as absolutely part of the place, for sure. Then we have a variety of people who, syndicated columnists or local columnists or one-shot columnists. You know, we publish a fair number of local opinions by local people on various, who know something about various subjects. And they all...
every once in a while, by someone who knows nothing about any subject, like
every now and then.
myself,
Yeah,
that
sure,
managed to get published some time back.
Right.
And,
We like to have all kinds of perspectives.
Yes. Of course, your feed now, it's become so expensive to cover both the capital here and Washington and all. So you have to rely more on various other outlets to get your information, Associated Press or Washington Post or whatever, you know.
Yep. Especially for the national and international news.
I guess you subscribe to those? Is how that works?
Yep. We subscribe to we're a member of the Associated Press. The Associated Press, we pay them a lot of money, but the Associated Press is a news cooperative. So we're a member, which means that we share all of our stuff with all the other members, and they share all of their stuff. We pay a fee, of course, a large fee, but we get a lot of almost all of our national and international news from the Associated Press or the Washington Post or the Chicago Tribune or McClatchy. We have a variety of news services that we count on for that.
Particularly with columnists also, I've noticed.
Yeah, we have a number of syndicated columnists and national columnists.
Like George Will, for instance.
Yep, George Will, for instance.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes, we do.
Speaking of baseball.
Speaking of baseball, George likes baseball.
A great baseball fan, but in my estimation, a great columnist as well.
Yep.
It's a really...
He is a picture of persistence. You know, George Will's columns, I don't know him personally, I've put him in the paper for many years. He sticks to his line of reasoning no matter which way the winds are blowing. And you can agree with it or not agree with it, but it's he's a useful, I don't know, I guess, anchor in the world of opinion.
And really well reasoned out.
Yep. I agree. I find his columns, you know, everybody needs an editor. Every column needs tightening. George Will's columns are the hardest to edit of any that I've ever edited on, because he tries to make every word work. He puts a lot into every word. It's hard to edit him.
Sometimes words that one might not be too familiar
That's
with
right.
also. He's got a great vocabulary.
Yes, he does.
Or a great thesaurus, one or the other.
Yeah, I think it's a vocabulary, actually.
I think it is, yeah. Now, on the other side of the coin, print is struggling. Print newspapers are struggling. Circulation is struggling. And I was really saddened to see this week that the Times-Picayune in New Orleans has folded after 182 years. And to me, that's just a piece of Americana that's gone forever, that's so important to us. And you grieve over things like that. Will print publication survive?
I think yes. I don't know, you know, what the enduring business model will be, or whether it will be something we're familiar with, or the frequency. But the entire news business is under pressure and has been for 15 years. And it's, you know, it's sort of a Rorschach in some ways. We'll get people who say, well, you're having trouble because you're too conservative, or you're having trouble because you're too liberal, or you're having trouble for this reason or that reason. And they all might have a point, but the real reason that the news business is under such duress is that the revenue model has changed. The arrival of the digital revolution and the internet blew up our business model. And the way we got money has changed. It's competition, it's innovation, it's all kinds of things that put pressure on all kinds of industries, and it's just happened that in the past 15 years it's been our turn to ride the big waves. And everybody is trying to figure out how to adapt.
Online is
challenge.
one way.
It's one way, but you still have to figure out how to get paid. That's the issue. We can get readers, we can get audience. We have a lot of audience, we have a lot of readers. But the question is, how are you going to raise money to pay for all this stuff? In the old days, newspapers in the U.S. got 75, 80% of their revenue from advertising.
Right.
And it tended to be profitable revenue. Circulation revenue in the old days about paid for what it cost to deliver the newspaper. Advertising revenue paid for everything else, including news. Now that has changed with all the competition. The biggest advertising outfits in the US now are Google and Facebook, and Amazon is rising fast. They don't create content, they don't create news, but they are great advertising vehicles, very competitive for people who want to find you and not me, or
And
me and not you.
they don't advertise either then, really.
Well, they
or if
do,
they do,
but
they don't
not
do it
in
in
a
the
local
local
newspaper,
papers.
right,
And
yeah.
when I say local, I mean big city papers.
Yep.
So,
So we've
although-
been disrupted in much the same way that retail has, and other businesses have, and we have to figure it out.
Yeah, I have a fear that one day we're just going to have Amazon and no other businesses and a lot of empty buildings, because I see them driving, as you get the big box stores, driving the little guy out. And to me, one of the really unique things about America is the fact that we had all these little stores. I can remember walking down with a nickel to the corner to get an ice cream at the pharmacy.
Yep.
Hello.
Yep.
That's gone. That's
Well, we've gone through waves of things like this. I don't know, but it's a dynamic economy with a lot of people in it, a lot of people with a lot of great ideas, and so I think we'll have lots of places to buy stuff from in the future too.
I see weekly papers seem to be doing well. Local, like, individual city papers seem to be doing okay, the weeklies.
Yeah, I think some of them are. Everybody's feeling the pressure, but one of the differences is that the smaller local papers oftentimes had, kept their costs in control forever, because they didn't have the big wave of money that some of the bigger papers had for 20, 30, 40 years. And so they were tighter to start with, some of them. And some of the winds of change weren't blowing quite so hard everywhere. So we'll see, but I think everybody's feeling the pressure. I don't think there's anybody who's not feeling the
Well, you
effects of
see
this
it
change in advertising.
as papers go out. I mean, just today in the paper was the talk about the sale of the Rochester paper. Now that's a paper that has 70,000 everyday readers, and it just was sold. From what
To a
I'm
foreign
reading,
company.
from what I'm reading, and that happened to be not a bad thing from the people that took it over.
I think
but
that's true.
A lot of these papers are being sold to companies that break them up or things like that, and that's really a worrisome thing to me.
There's a wave of consolidation going on as everybody tries to deal with the reduced revenue that has come with all this new competition and the digital revolution, and it's challenging for everybody, and not everybody's going to stay in business. But the effort to make your costs match your revenue is just necessary. It's just the way things are, and we can like it or not, but we have to work in that environment.
You have to live with it,
You
whether
bet.
you like it
and
or
try
not.
to
right.
and try to do the best we can with what we have, which is what we always aim to do.
Now, in the last decade, I attribute the start of it to when Jaime's expanded, but downtown St. Paul itself has taken on a whole new look. We have some really good apartments and condos. What used to be the West Building is going to be gone, and there's going to be buildings over the river. And downtown, we now have, we have Alliance Field. We have the Saints, who opened last night.
Yep.
We have the Wild,
Yep.
who now actually skate in what used to be the Macy's building. We have all these athletic teams which draw not only to the city, but certainly draw income to certain businesses. So there's been a big change in the face of downtown St. Paul.
There has, and I think there was one of these silly online lists this week that
I saw that.
they saw it. They said the worst place to live in every state, and St. Paul was on this silly list, which I disagree with as a proud St. Paul resident. That St. Paul was the worst. St. Paul is a great place. It is. It's like every city. It has its problems. We have some particular ones.
Go to Grand Avenue days and travel up Summit Avenue.
Sure. And go to the neighborhoods where we think are in difficult situations. They're great too. They really are. And it is, part of it is, I'm publishing an op-ed on Sunday, this coming Sunday, by a guy who's a researcher at Wilder. And his premise is, an op-ed column, his premise is, we're really good at measuring deficits. We're really good at measuring what's wrong. Let's start measuring better what's right. And he's talking in particular about
what a nice
kids.
premise, yeah.
It's a great premise. And I look at St. Paul that way, of course, and I'm sure lots of other people do too, and I'm a partisan. I live there, so. But I think it's a great place, and there's a lot going on, and including, some of it we see in these big stadiums, which are wonderful. But we also have other really remarkable things, like, for example, TU Dance. It's a dance company whose home is on University Avenue, University in Vandalia, started by Tony and Yuri Sands, who were dancers with Alvin Ailey in New York, and they started a school, and they have a professional company. They've got a great school. I have my kids take dance classes there. That's how I know more about it. But they've also been, for this past year, they've done this big collaboration, a dance and rock music collaboration that has taken them to New York and San Francisco and
Sounds like
all
they'd be
kinds of
good
places.
guests for Access to Democracy.
They would be great guests for Access. But they're one of the distinct things about St. Paul, Circus Juventus, another distinct thing about St. Paul. So I think that the minute it's like most places, the minute you start looking closer, you say, wow, there's a lot here. This is an interesting happening place.
Has the Green Line, the light rail, has that helped also?
I think so. It's the Green Line is a long-term play. I would say yes, it has. It's a long-term play. There's more than one way to look at it, but I think so. Yes, I think so. There's a lot starting to go on University Avenue along the Green Line.
So I see we only have about 4 minutes left. It's afternoon. We want to talk about putting out tomorrow's paper. What do we go through in the press room?
Sure. Well, so people started showing up at work, around 6. They might have logged in from home. The reporters would be out there all morning, all afternoon. Some editors would be on staff. There's a flow that it kind of looks like this. So here's early morning, here's noon, here's the afternoon, and here's the evening. It's the flow of work and the flow of people. The peak is probably late afternoon, early evening, and when the the work for print has been organized and set in motion. But I joke that, you know, in the old days we used to be just a daily, which is enough. Now we're a minutely too, because we're publishing online all
Right.
the time, which is very interesting. It's very interesting.
So, who are the people who get together and decide the placement of tomorrow's stories?
There are about the conversation continues all day long, you know, as we say, what's going on, what do you have, what do you have? But then we have several news meetings, one in the morning, one early afternoon, one a little later in the afternoon. And there's probably a half dozen editors who get together around 3, 4, 5, 6 editors who get together around 3 and say, here's what the front page is going to look like. And then we keep talking about that through the evening. I look at a proof of the front page most nights at about 9:30 or so. And by that time, we're pretty well locked in, but some things might change still.
Well, with, you know, emergencies and things
Yes.
that happen, yeah.
Yeah.
But you're talking at 9:30 at night. This is a very long day. What time do you
Yep.
get there in the morning?
Well, I usually get there these days because I drop one of my young kids off at school most days. I get there about 9.
So you're talking
And I
about a
usually leave-
12-hour day.
Well, I go home between, you know, for some of that, so 10 maybe. And you're always paying attention. You know, if you're
I don't
an
think
editor, you're
people
always paying attention.
recognize what goes into putting out that daily paper. And, you know, as far as I am concerned, it's the press, it's the media that has kept this country with what it is. And the attack on the media now really sickens me, the enemy of the people type psychology, which is coming out of Washington.
Well, the best thing we
is-
can do is do our job well and pursue the ideals that we believe we're for, which is, you know, find the facts and tell them to the best of our ability. And I have a lot of really good colleagues. My colleagues are hardworking. They care about the community. They care about their craft, all of them, and we're fortunate.
And the backbone of our democracy, to me, is the First Amendment, freedom of the press. And keep it going.
Yep.
Keep it going. We've got any last thoughts in the last minute that we have here?
Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad
Well,
to be here. Yeah,
It's
thank you.
always an education, and it's
Yep.
always an enjoyment to have you here. And people really should appreciate what the press does for them, and the Pioneer Press, which is an objective paper. Sometimes I agree with you, sometimes I don't,
Yep.
editorially, and that's the way it should be.
That's the way it should be.
And no, I appreciate it. And we've been talking with Mike Burbach, who is not only a vice president, but is also the editor. I think you were the editorial page editor when we first met.
That's true.
So
Yep.
thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you very much, Alan. I appreciate it.